I came to San Diego with the idea that I could change the world through innovation, because it is my personal perspective that we will not work our way out of the trouble that we're in, but we might invent our way out. So innovation to me is the path. And we opened our doors about 2 years ago. We serve businesses all across San Diego and Imperial counties. So we about 5% of the work that we do has to do with students, faculty, staff, and alumni with the university that we serve. About 95% is community-based. And we have 620 companies that are part of our group. And we've done $42.2 million in capital for those companies and impacted 1,200 jobs in the last 23 months. So we're super excited to know that you can roll out a really great program like that. And I came from a very small market, so it's cool to see that you could take something that's only ever been done in a little place and do it in a big place and do it effectively. And we do it through partnerships. So the clean tech group here, SD Rain, one of our, which I'm sure you've heard about, the Maritime Alliance, all powerful partners, because our expertise is not in water and energy, our expertise is in business. And so when we work with powerful partners, we're able to really elevate the programs and take things to the next level. So some cool world-changing things on the platform for us. I am mostly here to learn today, so hopefully I can ask some good questions, and we'll spend the rest of the time working with our panel. So we're gonna do quickly introductions. Everybody's gonna introduce themselves, and then each one of our panelists has a short presentation. So if you can each give your quick bio. I don't think we have a mic that we can pass.
Nope, we're mic'd. We're good.
Fantastic. I will stay right here, and you can each introduce yourselves.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Kim Baker. I'm the Director of Water Innovation for a nonprofit called Elemental Accelerator. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but we're a growth stage accelerator, and we look to fill the capital gap between pilot and commercialization.
Hi there, my name is Phil Bishop. I'm from the National Oceanography Centre in Southampton in the UK. My job there is Industry Partnership Manager, and that role essentially focuses on trying to bring in collaborations between business and our researchers and engineers and technologists.
Okay, hello. My name is Ove Hagesæter, and I'm heading the GC Ocean Technology, which is a cluster in the western coast of Norway, in Bergen. Big part of our job is, of course, to kind of help creating the new companies, or the companies for the future. We run a big ocean industry accelerator there, and we do a lot of programs, which I'm gonna tell you more about in the debate.
Hello, I'm Justin Sternberg. I'm with the Alaska Ocean Cluster, and for the past year was managing the Blue Pipeline Incubator in Seward, Alaska, which is 2 hours south of Anchorage. It's the furthest northern deep sea, or deep water ice-free port in North America.
All right, and with that, I'm gonna invite Kim to come up and talk for a few minutes. Our goal really is to leave a lot of time for question and answer, so we'll briefly explain what we do, and then hopefully we can field some questions.
Thanks, Misty, and thanks to the BlueTech team for having us. So as I mentioned, we're a nonprofit, and what that means to any of you out there in the audience that are founders, we're extremely founder-friendly. We're not looking to take a majority shareholder of your company. We're truly looking to help you grow your business and the ecosystem that you're thriving in. So to date, we've funded 99 companies, which is really exciting. Who's gonna be that number 100? Hopefully it's someone here in the audience today. We've funded 99 companies. We funded what we call demonstration projects, essentially to the industry partners. That's a pilot project, and we've done 69 of them to date. This year, we saw over 800 applications to our program, and we saw applications from about 60 countries around the world. So we're pretty excited about the impact we're making both here home as well as abroad. And so what are we all about? Although we don't define our program on the SDGs as we're sitting here talking about today, we define the sectors that we work in based on climate change and carbon emissions savings. So the sectors that we work in include water, wastewater, stormwater, ocean tech, as well as energy, mobility, agriculture, and circular economy. And as we all sitting here today know, a lot of these technologies overlap in different industries, and we really look to foster that cross-collaboration. So we believe that innovation can be built and transformed within cities, communities, and islands. And we believe that by doing these pilot projects on the ground in these communities, we can foster that transformation to scale 10 times larger than the one project we're able to do with a company over the next 2 to 3 years. So we're in the business of systemic thinking and systems transformation across economies, across ecosystems, and across communities. We work with companies a number of different ways, and I could stand up here for an hour and tell you more about them. If you want to know the details, come and find me after. But what we really look for in a company is differentiated IP that's both going to have an impact revenue-wise, financially, as well as an environmental positive impact. We have 3 tracks. Our go-to-market track is our earliest stage track. Our later tracks are demonstration and equity and access. And these 2 tracks are project-based tracks where we work with the communities that these projects are developed in, as well as the end-use customer with other partnerships in mind as well. The one thing that I'll highlight here that's probably a little bit different than other accelerator programs that you've seen is, in addition to funding, we provide this project support, and we also have something called the Equity and Access track. That's our newest track, and it does tie into the Sustainable Development Goals in a little bit of a different way, where we're looking for diverse teams. We're looking to make an impact in communities that are low to moderate income, potentially highly polluted environments. And so we have a little bit different spin on what these Sustainable Development Goals mean to us, in addition, of course, to the environmental component. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Let's see. Any idea?
Green button.
Yeah. There we go. Hiya. So firstly, apologies for the sore throat, or not sore throat, the losing my voice. I think it's a sign that I've enjoyed my week here. There's been lots of people to get to know and interact with during the breaks and during the sessions and afterwards, of course. So yeah, thanks for having me. So as I've said, I'm part of the National Oceanography Centre. I'm going to focus on what we do there to accelerate not only business, but technology as well. So here we've got a couple of pictures that just summarize some of the technology that we have in what we call our Marine Robotics Innovation Centre. The name suggests marine robotics, but it's also the science that goes into those. So it's not just the vehicles, but it's the technology that we stuff full of it. And it was built and opened in 2015 and opened there by Joe Johnson, who's our Minister for Science and Innovation, I think he was. You probably recognise his big brother a bit better. Yeah, Boris. So he came down afterwards and had a look around our site and explored some of the equipment we had. By all accounts, I think that he asked to mount one of our robotic vehicles down there for some publicity, but thankfully, yeah, that wasn't approved. Anyway, so the Innovation Centre, it's made up of about 30 partner organisations, and that's anything from SMEs to government bodies or big international companies such as the Shells, the BPs, the Teledynes, or yeah, all sorts of people. So since inception 4 years ago, we brought in around £20 million of funding, and that's been split across the partners, obviously, and the NOC, which has been an invaluable resource for us. And the way that we've done it, and in a way that is beneficial for everybody, is everyone has their own strengths, and we've been writing bids and proposals together to ensure that we can win work together that we wouldn't necessarily win otherwise. I was told a story earlier on by Kevin Forshaw, who I believe is over there, used to be our Director of Enterprise at NOC. And he was told by a senior director at BP that they wouldn't have in their company, they wouldn't be in the position they are and have the stance they have at the moment on robotic vehicles if it wasn't for working with the NOC. So that's great for us to see. I know it's not a BlueTech company, BP, but the work that they do and the work that the autonomous vessels do for them accelerates the technology behind all of the companies that we work with on a more day-to-day basis, but also saves a lot of emissions, for example, taking the vessels out of the picture. And yeah, down at the bottom, you'll see a few of our vessels. I don't know if it made its way over the pond, but Boaty McBoatface is down there in the middle. So for anyone that doesn't know, that was a terrible, terrible marketing plan by the Natural Environment Research Council, who we used to be owned by until a couple of weeks ago. Now we're an independent charity. And they decided to have a poll and decide what to name their 150 million pound Arctic or Antarctic research vessel. And the winner with 120,000 votes was Boaty McBoatface. So yeah, they regretted that, and what we did, they decided not to call their vessel that. What we did is sort of use the marketing and the awareness of that name, and decide to stamp it on our vessel. So here we've got an example of where we've worked with a small company, and we've helped bring a new market that they've developed in hand with us, and bring them to a place where we don't think it would have been possible without the help of our innovation centre. The community we've got there is fantastic. We've got, as I say, 30 partner organisations, and every week we'll be holding external events on a Friday over coffee and donuts, just to try and foster those relationships and make sure that people know who are in the building and what resources are there. We've got things like test tanks. We have all sorts of equipment there at the Oceanography Centre that people are free to use, and the idea is that the more people we get in, the more we can bring people together and get to a higher level than we would do without. And just a little bit about this project. What we did was, they're the main people behind it, but they've developed a system where you can deploy and recover AUV from a surface vessel autonomously, which is a big milestone in that industry. So there we go. Thank you.
There we are. Okay, great. Okay, I guess we'll have to repeat just a little bit what I said when I started in the last panel. I represent one of a global center of expertise in Norway. It's a organized cluster organization. We are one of the most kind of mature cluster and have been around for quite a long time, 12, 13 years, which is kind of high age for a cluster organization. Our area of expertise is based on really knowledge from the oil and gas industry and underwater technology. And we also, as I mentioned last time, we're also a proud member of the BlueTech Cluster Alliance. Our mission, what we really try to do, and this is important also when we come to acceleration and incubation of companies, is really to take all the knowledge, all the technology, or most of it in the oil and gas industry, and repurpose it into new applications. And by doing that, open up new markets for them. And by doing that also speed up the green shift. And we believe also that some of the most interesting companies in the future will be those who will grow up in the interface between those traditional sectors. And that's important because based on that, we have set up also an ocean industry accelerator, where we try to put together those companies which kind of work across these traditional sector borders. Now, behind all this is really a very important thing. It's the ecosystem for innovation, or the stakeholder model, as we call it. And it really is based on, it's really a triple helix model, but we have kind of expanded it a little bit to make it more easy to implement. And the expansion here is the entrepreneur, and I'm going to dig into that a bit more. It's the entrepreneur part and the capital part. I mean, all companies, all projects, everything needs financing. And if we go a bit further and dig into that part on the left-hand side over there, we do what we call ScaleUp programs. At least in Norway, there's been a lot of focus the last decade on startups. And about 80%, at least in Norway, of the startups doesn't exist after 5 years. And among those 80% of the rest of the 20% is still a kind of a handful of people. They haven't become kind of a important company in the area. So what we try to do is to find and identify those companies which has the potential with all it takes, right management, the right skills, right technology, the right whatever, which has the potential to really grow and to go from being a kind of a local company to become an export company. So we have set up this, what we call it the ScaleUp program, and we have done this in collaboration with MIT in Boston. By the way, this ecosystem model is also based on the model from MIT. So we run these 3-month programs with these carefully selected companies which has this potential to help them in growing their company. It's not a kind of a teacher school type of thing. They are working on their own strategy, and we offer them a lot of kind of mentors and consultancy and expertise to help them evaluate their own strategy in this field. So I just came from Boston. I arrived from Boston when I came here because we're doing that program over there now. Another thing we are doing is really also, and it's important when it comes also to the sustainability goals of the United Nations, is to help the company which have kind of born and raised in the oil and gas industry to enter the new market. So we set up what we call these crossover programs, which is basically an introduction to a new market, but not any market, to a related market, as we call it, meaning a market which has some commonalities which the markets you are already in. Because otherwise, I mean, the risk is too high. So we also run these different crossover Excel programs, which introduce then former oil and gas companies or supplier companies in the oil and gas industry to the, as an example, offshore floating wind, and also other programs introducing them to the seafood farming industry, which is becoming much more technical. So that's what we do, and how we try to kind of speed also by doing this the green shift in this ocean industry. So thank you.
So the Alaska Ocean Cluster is in its early stages. It's about 2.5 years old. And just for some background on Alaska, it's the largest state in the United States. If you put it over the lower 48, it would stretch from Florida to California and Canada to Mexico. The coastline is larger than the rest of the United States coastlines combined. If you include all the islands, it's 40,000 miles plus of coastline. We have one of the largest EEZs in the world, the largest fishery in the world, Alaska pollock fishery, and some of the largest kelp beds, in the world in the Aleutian Islands. On the other side of the coin, we're the second smallest state by population. There's around 750,000 people in the state. Much of it's very rural, and the economy has largely been resource extraction, and it's kind of been run as a colony of sorts for the lower 48. The Alaska Ocean Cluster was founded to try to develop and diversify the state's economy, utilizing the ocean resources that are available. And one of the components was the Blue Pipeline Incubator that had just completed its first year this past April. And we graduated 4 companies. There was a mariculture company that was focused on oyster farming. There was an ocean energy company that filed a provisional patent for novel ocean energy technology that pulled hydrogen out of water, that won the University of Alaska Invention of the Year award. There was also a coastal tourism company, which is a growing industry in Alaska and growing, like in Seward, the cruise ship traffic was up by 30% the past year. And then there was a seafood processing company, which is also a significantly large industry in Alaska. In this case, it was a small mom and pop operation, but there's a tremendous amount of seafood processing that happens both onshore and in the ocean in Alaska. We raised $1.6 million out of $2.3 million that we were seeking and continue to seek. And all of that came from within a community of around 250 or 2,500 people. There's also a growing angel investor network that's in Alaska, and one of the companies were semi-finalists there as well. There was some challenges in terms of taking the incubator model and bringing it to Alaska. And Alaska is kind of famous for taking economic development models that work elsewhere and breaking them. They just don't translate very well. In this case, it did translate, but some of the challenges are that Alaska has a high degree of entrepreneurship, consistently ranks in the top 3 states of entrepreneurship per capita. However, most of those businesses are small mom and pops, so they're 1 or 2 people. And when you have an incubator model that kind of relies on a well-rounded team or being able to find the people to bring into the team that can do the pieces that the founders cannot, it's challenging to do that if the people don't exist or if they're already busy doing something else. So that was actually really interesting for us to look at and to consider going forward how we might be able to modify that to something that could look more like a startup studio where you bring some of those key pieces of the business development in-house and then provide those to the entrepreneurs so that they're not forced to either learn them themselves or go find somebody to do that. The other piece is that when we initially started, we were working very closely with the university and some of the investors, and they were really pushing the entrepreneurship. But what we realized was also a critical component of that was engaging with industry. And Alaska has some amazing working waterfronts in these small towns where there's a very diverse range of industries that are there. Seward's no exception. It's actually kind of a microcosm of what you'd see throughout the state. 3 different seafood processors, the universities there, there's shipbuilding, ship repair, a hatchery for shellfish, and more. There's a vocational training center there that's very successful as well. And so bringing those pieces together to actually inform so that the industry can inform and work with the entrepreneurs is something that we'll be looking forward to do. We're also looking at expanding into other locations. So the idea was to actually bring some of the entrepreneurship support to various coastal communities in Alaska. So we're in talks about bringing the Blue Pipeline into Kodiak as well, which has a similar diverse base of industries that are existing there, particularly in seafood processing. And then there's interest all throughout the state. The mariculture industry is really just getting started, but seaweed and oysters and shellfish, there's tremendous potential there. I worked with the state to develop the protocols for permitting seaweed mariculture, and we were working with a scientist out of the University of Connecticut named Charlie Yarish, who is one of kind of the Johnny Appleseed of seaweed farming in North America. And when we were initially looking at going into the state, he characterized Alaska as that it could be the Saudi Arabia of seaweed farming because of the resources there. So it's a tremendous, it's a land of opportunity, but it's also, I think, a little bit difficult for people to get in there and do the work to figure out how to take advantage of it and what the constrictions are. So that was something that we'll continue to refine and develop as we go forward. Thank you.
Now I'm a little bit intimidated. It's pretty fun, pretty exciting, and I'd like to spend like the rest of the week, or maybe all of next week, just sort of picking the brains of these folks and see how we compare and how we might be able to work together. So I guess first question, you know, my center has 620 companies. Justin's group graduated 4. Would love to hear the opinion on big versus little. Like how many, is it better to have a small number of companies that you provide really intense support for, or a large group of companies that maybe do a better job working with each other? So I would love to hear the opinion of the panel on that. Justin, do you want to start?
Sure.
You have the-
Sure, in our case, it's not really, I mean, that's what we had to work with. Seward's, a very small town. It can grow to like 40,000 people in the summer during the tourism season, but year round, it's around 2,500 people in the town itself. So, finding ocean-based businesses that are in early stage that want to be involved in an incubator is a bit of a challenge. And whether or not we'll be able to do that every year or need to look at some sort of model where we do work virtually and pull in companies from around the state, we'll have to see. I don't think anybody really knows at this point.
I'll go. So we're based in Hawaii. Our program started in Hawaii and has since expanded into other geographical regions. But if any of you have ever been to Hawaii, you understand the sort of presence of community and culture there. And so that's something we've really looked to pull into our program and continue as we grow the program. So we really thrive on what we call peer-to-peer learning, to the point where every single year we invite all 100 CEOs back to the islands or to our network in California for a week-long event together so that they can have this cross-collaboration with us, with mentors, with partners, et cetera. And something we've learned is, in addition to the peer-to-peer learning, we do run a cohort model. And for those earlier stage companies, which we consider go-to-market companies, which is customer discovery, kind of sales channel vetting, we found that a sweet spot is about 7 to 10 companies that work together. That's so that I can get to know you, you can get to know me, we're on a first name basis, and we actually have the companies tackle some of their biggest challenges together. Because oftentimes the person sitting next to you has probably had a similar challenge, albeit often in a different industry for us, but there's a lot of learning that comes that way. And then as a whole, we found that the number of around 20 per program year really has been beneficial for us.
We've actually found the same. So we actually
Interesting.
take our group, break it up, cap it, and limit the amount of interaction. And we do by industry and also across industry. So on things where they're directly competing, we mix them up across industries. Where they're not competing and they're in the same industry facing the same problems, for example, on regulatory issues, we'll pair them up with their industry-specific groups.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, yes.
I guess you need some kind of critical mass. But then I don't know the exact what that is. I mean, the exact number. What we do in our programs, of course, is we despite these programs are generic, we try to organize them for like the Oceantech, so that the companies attending also have certain commonality. They overlap each other because that's how they also are more. Then they will learn, I think, more from each other. But then again, I mean, if they are exactly the same or like and have the same network, I mean, then it doesn't become kind of innovative enough either. So it's a balance there, of course.
Yeah, for us, for what we need as an Oceanography Institute and what the science needs that we're trying to develop, the bigger the better, but up to a point, like you've just said.
Yeah.
When it's small, sort of low level with just a few parties involved, it's easy to work organically. But when you get up to the size of like where we are with 30 partners at the moment, and we're all trying to accelerate this technology to a new level, you need more formal sort of processes in place to make sure that you are actually all still getting those benefits together. Is company A still getting a chance to interact with company Z, and making sure that they still see each other on a day-to-day basis. So going back to the Friday coffee and donuts that we do and the external presenters that we bring in, just basically an excuse to get everybody around a table together on a regular basis, because when you get to a certain size, it's easy just to stick to your table, isn't it? So we really sort of work to try and stop that.
Yeah.
So question for the audience. So for all of you out there, how many of you have incubators or accelerators or would like to see one get off the ground in the communities where you serve? Okay, so a few. All right, so for you, I think a good question is how are your programs funded and who are your partners? So for us, I can tell you our budget's $1 million a year. So 2 years ago, it was $215,000. We've grown it pretty rapidly. About $250,000 comes to us from the SBA, $100,000 from our university host, about $250,000 from the governor's office and $300,000 from the county, and then we pick up ticket sales, sponsorships, donations, all of those other things for a balance of about $1 million a year budget. And our partners include Small Business Administration, the SBDC system, and then we've got 20 what we call title partners, of which TMA is one. Clean Tech San Diego is also one. So we have some strategic partners that are part of our group as well. So I'd be curious to know how the rest of you are structured and funded.
Well, this program I told you about, this MIT ScaleUp program, is funded by the local municipality. We have to apply for that money in competition with other projects and other applications, and also by the local bank. Because the local bank, it's kind of a business development for them. They want to kind of know as much as possible about the new upcoming successful companies. So that's why they put money into it. So, but okay, it's you have to apply each year, and so I used to call myself a kind of a professional beggar when I try to raise this money, because these MIT people, they are good and they are clever, but they're not the cheapest in the world. That's for sure. So it costs money.
So I'll go next. Yeah, we're made up of a really diverse group of companies. We've got the 1 and 2 person teams, so the very small companies, and then we have the big organizations, and they will just send the occasional people down for, I don't know, 20 weeks a year, but 1 day a week. So yeah, the funding streams as a part of that are equally diverse. We're bidding for government contracts for various types of funds together on a daily basis, but also you obviously have the bigger companies that bring in the big might that comes with that as well. So yeah, it's pretty varied for us.
I'll go. We've basically got 3 pillars of what we call our funding partners. The first is we're funded significantly through the Department of Defense Office of Naval Research. We have 2 $30 million grants that we're basically spending on our cohort companies that we have in our program. We've also got family partnerships, family offices act as kind of one of those pillars. And then we've got a 3rd pillar, which is our partnerships program. This is much less significant of a funding resource for us than those first 2 I mentioned. These are corporate entities that we call global partners or innovation partners, and they pay us a very small fee to be considered in our network. What that does for our program is it guarantees the market pull. It guarantees the customer representation is pulling those demonstration projects that we do with our companies into their own marketplaces.
We had to really bootstrap it and get creative. Blue Pipeline was a partnership between the City of Seward, the Seward Chamber of Commerce, the Alaska Ocean Cluster, and the Small Business Development Center. And so each contributed equally, and then the Alaska Ocean Cluster is itself under the 501c3 of the Bering Sea Fishermen's Association, which is a nonprofit working in fisheries in Western Alaska. And they pull in additional funding for travel and whatnot through some of the CDQ groups, which are supportive of them, and Blue Pipeline as well. And CDQ groups are community development quota, which was an opportunity when the Stevens fisheries legislation came out to actually put some of the quotas back into Alaska communities. It kind of steadily migrated out of Alaska, and so it was an opportunity to do economic development in those areas. And so they're reinvesting in this, looking at it as an opportunity for future growth in this space.
That's great. Realizing that incubators and accelerators were primarily developed for things that are non-tangible, software, those kinds of things, and understanding that the work that we do in BlueTech, we're talking about a natural environment and a ton of infrastructure most of the time. It's not like we can just drop a handful of people in a room with no windows and let them build software and turn that into $1 million overnight. But the incubator accelerator model has to be able to accommodate in some way. Can any of you speak to how you've either dealt with the shortcomings or identified, or at least are aware of some of those considerations?
I'll go. So one thing that we've recognized and adapted, number one is the long sales cycle and the long development timeline that's required, especially in the water industry where I sit. It's often a year to a 2-year time frame that we're doing these deployment projects with our companies. But probably bigger picture even than that is the policy angle of this, right? So all of these hard technologies that we're talking about across all of these industries have policy implications, especially here in the United States. We now have a policy team. And so when we talk about community engagement and community activation, part of what I'm saying is there's policies that have to change, they have to adapt, they have to identify gaps. And we really work on a local level as well as a national level to change those policies to enable the deployment and the adoption of technology.
Yeah, well, in the incubator we are running, each company are allowed to be there for 2 years because they're sponsored. So they had to kind of, in that period, show some progression and after that move out from the incubator. So the bit larger companies, the ScaleUps I'm talking about, are companies on their own, basically, but they are a member of the cluster. So, so we offer them this program as a part of being member of the cluster. So we just run them as program and projects, and we try to follow them up afterwards to help them, guide them if they like to further on. But and most of them like that too. So that's the way we do it. And for that guiding, this my cluster is paying for it. So that's for free for them. Also, this program, which is quite expensive, we depending on how money I'm able to raise, but normally we pay like 80% of the cost. So there's a part they have to pay themselves. Normally they pay their expenses and a part of the fee to attend the program.
Anyone else? Justin, you want to share a little?
Well, I mentioned earlier just the limitation on human capital. I think bringing in outside expertise, although in some ways Alaska is behind, it also is an opportunity to leapfrog forward. So working with other clusters and investors, technology providers from outside the state, it's a great place to do pilot projects. The cost of electricity in some of the remote Alaskan communities can be upwards of 70 cents per kilowatt hour. So energy technologies, for example, can be profitable at the pilot phase, which is a great opportunity for companies to come in and actually be making money as they're testing and developing the technology. But I think really modifying and finding funding so that we can expand the capacity that we can provide to these companies and turnkey it a little bit better than trying to just teach them the 10% of the area that the founder is not good at, and expecting them to do that on top of everything else they're doing would be a better model going forward.
So I want to talk a little bit about Valley of Death, right? Like, so a lot of the companies that we see them at the ideation phase. We help them with patents and intellectual property type stuff, maybe even through their prototypes. But as they move on, there's this space where there's just not money. And I've got this great story I want to share. So Michael, how long have you been working with Oriana Bretschker? A while. A dozen years?
2.5 years. No, I've known her about 7 or 8 years. But when she spun out 3 years ago, and then she had some course corrections along the way. Yeah.
Right, so Michael and I worked with this company here in town. Company's name is AquaCycle. They were part of the clean tech cluster here and had worked closely with TMA. And they grew up a bunch. So basically it's a water treatment system that they've shrunk to the size of a car battery, and they click together like Legos. That's my elementary understanding. I actually
Wastewater
I could talk wastewater a long time, but I'll spare you the sordid details. And they are able to transform the water into potable water and create enough energy to run the system. So it's this really, really super cool inline structured modular project. And they applied to what we call the San Diego Angel Conference last year. First one we've run like that, and it's because I came to San Diego with the belief that we had a whole lot of people around here with the means who weren't writing checks to invest in startup companies. So if you look at the national numbers, your angel investment should be about a third of whatever your venture capital is. That's the case most everywhere. Here in San Diego, it's about 9%. So we know that there's a big delta there that we should be working towards. And so every place I've ever worked, I hear two things. The companies say nobody's writing checks, and the investors say there aren't any good deals. Right? That's a terrible catch-22, and we're trying to fix that problem and stop that conversation. So what we did was we opened it up last year, and we spent 3 months trying to train entrepreneurs to apply and submit deals for our angel conference. We put out there that we were going to have a $200,000 investment at the end of that. And at the end of our application period, we took those deals and we used them as the training fodder for a group of brand new investors. 34 investors, each of them paid, the unit prices were about $5,000. And we moved 107 units. So we ended up committing $535,000 of new money into the ecosystem last year. Aquacycle won. They won $295,000 of that first round. And as we started asking those companies, like, who did you work with along the way? Oriana said, you guys. Like she said, you were almost first, right? To help her get her technology started and whatever. So she took $295,000 from the conference. She ended up with 34 new investors who became ambassadors for her, carried her deal all over the place, and she closed $4 million in 3 months. So that was how we sort of supercharged the environment. Our group came back this year. Our deadline is 27 days from now, and we expect 150 companies to apply. We also have a fund management team that capped their fund this year at $1 million. And the exciting thing is that's just the first money. That's not the real money. The real money happened since our event last March. The real money is about $18 million that have been floated through those same companies because they did become more fundable. And we did have a bunch of investors who became more willing and able to write checks. So that's part of how we have managed Valley of Death. I would be super excited to hear other ways that you've helped your companies manage that, stepping into commercialization and scale.
Yeah, well, we basically do it via these programs. So a big part of that is introducing them to the right type of capital. So we have a kind of a contact list for both, different funding structures, national funding structures, but also international. So that's part of what we do. We introduce these companies to these investors and try to kind of, in a way, educate the investors, making them open their eyes, see what's happening here. And also we train these companies to do their presentations for the investors. I mean, what to say, how to write their memorandums and things like that, and how to present themselves. That's a big part of it. We don't go into any financing ourselves, so we're doing this kind of educational and facilitating the whole thing. That's how we do it.
I'll give 2 points. I'd say partnerships and storytelling. And Oriana's a great example, I think, of storytelling. She gets up on the stage, she tells you her story, you remember her. She's really become significant in the community around her. She's become significant in the community of what is water innovation. People know who she is. And I'll share one sort of fun little story that we've done around storytelling for a company. It's an electric bus company. It's called Proterra, for those of you who are into the electric world of things. So there's a conference of mayors in Hawaii every year. It was in Hawaii this year. It travels year to year. So this year, all of the mayors descended upon Hawaii, and we're working with this company called Proterra, an electric bus company. How do we get these conference of mayors to understand that they could have electric buses in their local cities? We wrapped an electric bus with a picture of the water level rising in Hawaii with one of the famous statues, so the statue looks like it's sinking. So the electric bus pulls up and it parks at the center of this forum where all of these mayors are. Well, guess what? It got their attention. They wanted to know what the bus is, how it works, why there's a statue that's famous in Hawaii, why it's sinking. And it was a story, and it created this buzz at the event that sort of, you can't ignore it. And so that's something we really work with our companies, is to make this stuff personable and to make those connections to people that are making the decisions at the end of the day. And then on the partnership side, just quickly, I'll say we like to design our projects so that there's an end-use customer, a corporate partner, will come in as a funding partner, and then we have the startup as well. And from an investor standpoint, once you bring an investor to the table, that's kind of undeniable. When you've got the market pull, you've got everything sort of firing on all cylinders, and you've got the end-use customer at the table saying, yes, I want this, and it works. So that's the puzzle pieces that we hope to put together.
Yeah, we haven't wrapped any buses in graphics. But yeah, we're quite...
More complicated than it sounds, actually.
Yeah, I bet. So we're slightly different in terms of our main strength is our network of companies that we work with and the people we work with and the technologies that we use and develop day in, day out. So that's our main seller and what we try and use to push things to the next level. So in terms of if we want, we have a new gizmo that we're trying to bring out with a partner organization, then we have the contacts within the larger industries that we can call upon to use as a bit of a sounding board for one, but also gauge interest and you're going to the right people. Whereas for a lot of the small companies that we work with, they don't have that foot in the door at all. And I think that's what sets us apart from perhaps some of the other avenues that might be open to these people.
We haven't really dealt with it as of yet. Community plays a really big role in Alaska, and you wouldn't know it because everybody's wearing hoodies and Carhartts, but there's millionaire fishermen walking around, and who you know and whether or not they like you can play a really big role in terms of finding funding. So cash flow as well, because a lot of the companies can cash flow pretty quickly, and then scale it from there.
And I know Alaska's actually planning an angel conference. We worked with the same guy out of Seattle that's helped to put both of those together, so kind of exciting. I want to make sure I leave some time for questions. We've got about 10 minutes left in the session, and so I wanted to see if we had some burning questions. You can ask us anything. Questions for the panel.
I don't know if this is just a UK thing or whether it happens in the US as well, but when you have someone who's invented a product, it's their baby, they're very passionate about their product, how do you convince them that they have to give away equity to raise finance?
That is a great question, and one we struggle with, and one I spent about a half an hour with somebody on yesterday, right? So the quick short answer is a small fraction of something really, really big is a whole lot more than 100% of nothing. Like that's the short answer. And I always give the example of Bill Gates. So how much do you think he owns of Microsoft? Less than 3%, right? Who knows that? So yeah, you give up some control. Like I think our early investor or our early companies always are afraid that's going to happen as soon as they take their first investor. And on the angel side, it almost never happens. They're counting on somebody to have the expertise, continue to move this forward, to have the drive and dream and passion to keep with it. We don't ever even see that as a risk until we get so much further down the line and we're talking like private equity money. And when you start to have that conversation, like, could you really run $1 billion company? Do you even want to? So when we start to talk about, like, the company has to grow up a long time before anybody wants to step in and help you with the management. And by then, you're going to be ready to have them do it. So, yeah.
But it's a good question because one of the things we try to teach them as early as possible is this isn't about your baby. This is really about who's your first customer and what's your value value proposition, thank you. That's what it's all about. So forget about your baby. I mean, that's emotions. It doesn't sell. You have to have a customer who likes your baby. So, yeah.
There has to be that understanding that they're coming to you for you offer the knowledge and the wisdom and experience that they perhaps don't have. So hopefully, I'm going to use that story about Microsoft. That's great.
Right?
Yeah.
Everybody should use that story.
Yeah.
There's another question over here. Oh,
Yeah, thank you. This is sort of a tag along to the last question. Much has been made about what an incubator can bring in terms of capital to the entrepreneur who's in the process of, trying to establish operations. But really, what Philip was saying is that in the UK model, a big part of the service that's delivered is going into industry and identifying the contact that would then one day make that business a success for the capital. Can you talk a little bit about what your incubators do for that when working with your entrepreneurs?
I can give an example. I can't disclose any of the names, but we've got a major corporate leader in the water space. We've got a company who's working in the water space within our portfolio, and we've got the end-use customer. And so what we've done is kind of work it from both angles. We've got contacts at the innovation center within this large corporate entity, and it takes about a year to just figure out who that decision maker is, because these companies are huge. Once you figure out who that decision maker is, you have to track them down and actually get a meeting. So we've already done that sort of backlog homework. And then here we come in with this project that we're getting off the ground now with this water startup. So now they're saying, okay, I can deploy here in this region with this customer, but wouldn't it be nice if I could have them as a strategic partner? And we say, oh, actually, by the way, we actually know the people on the innovation team making the decision. You go pitch to the business unit that's actually going to use your technology in the long term, and we bring all of these people together at the table. And we kind of replicate this model on a case-by-case basis for these different companies. So we act as just another way in, and also a line of support throughout the duration of these discussions to say, have you thought about this? What about this? This is what the corporate company is thinking and wanting. So let's do that instead.
Yeah, we wouldn't typically invest financially in these products that are being brought to us. So yeah, our service is elsewhere in terms of what we can offer. But we're in a privileged position now where we're at a size that people are approaching us in terms of they have an office up in Aberdeen, which is northern Scotland, and they would like to set up a central or southern office. So they've heard about the innovation centre and the accelerator that we have down there, and they want to put people there. And it sort of snowballs the effect, and it just keeps on going where you have more and more people bringing more and more to the table. So yeah, it's worked for us, but going back to the point earlier, that will only be up to a certain level.
and so for us, because our program's funded, our primary grants through the SBA, and then everything else sort of bolts onto that. Small Business Act protects the entrepreneurs. We're not allowed to take an equity position. We go to jail. Like, it's a pretty big deal if you get caught messing around with that stuff. So we can't take a gift. Like, I had somebody offer me, like, she has a new natural deodorant and chapstick, which she handed me travel size things of on the way here. And I was like, I'm not going to tell her no right now, but I am going to mail it back to her with the explanation, because I realized I was going to be late if I tried to argue with her. So we do see a lot of those around, though, like, and I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just for us. We're not allowed to take an equity position. The Founders Institute takes 4% warrant, and part of that gets divided among everybody in each cohort, which is kind of a cool model. So if one of the companies in there succeeds, you all become part of their success stream, and there's some built-in stuff to help each other out. I think when you're talking about how you engage people to play with you, to take equity instead of be on the payroll, making sure you get that deal structured properly early on. So we see it, we've been doing a lot of this lately. 4 years to vest, there's a 1-year cliff. If you leave within 1 year, you don't get a dime, and then it starts to vest after that, so that you have people who stay engaged, and like we call it, keeping you in the boat, right? You play different if your feet are wet.
Misty, I think we got time for one more question. Since I have the microphone, I'm going to take it. So you just said that by law you're not able to take equity, but I am curious, because some accelerators don't, and some do. Obviously depends to some extent on their funding model. And some accelerators really try and help the ecosystem where they are, and some are trying to pull people from around the world. And I'm curious, I don't know that there's a right answer, but I am interested in kind of opinions, really. In your case, you can't take equity, but what do you see? I mean, I'm just curious in your opinion, everybody's opinion, on number one, do you think accelerators should take equity, or does it really depend on the accelerator? And number two is, where should you pull from? What do you think is appropriate? One of my concerns is brain drains from developing countries. When you bring people to a developed country, you fund them, but we don't create the environment in Peru that they can go back to. So I'm just curious about what role do you think accelerators can play and should play? Just, again, opinions. I'd love to go down the row and hear your thoughts.
Who wants to start?
I will. Particularly on the brain drain issue, that's a huge issue in rural Alaskan coastal communities because their kids go off and get an education, and unless they're a doctor or a school teacher, they have no job to come back to. They've essentially gone out of the workforce. So doing that kind of hands-on work to develop the community capacity, and I think there's a lot of interesting areas where development of the coastal resources can play a role in that. And there's some interesting changes in Alaska that have happened where it's not, conservation has shifted from about protecting the environment versus jobs to actually creating jobs that keep people in their communities and take better care of the environment around them. So that's been an interesting shift that shows a lot of promise for us.
So I think the three companies you had in your first cohort, were they hyper local? I mean, were they really from Seward, or were you taking them further afield? And if so, how did you try and prepare them, the region, so they could go home?
They were all, 3 of the 4 were based in Seward. So that was, one of them is a coastal tourism company it's totally based there. The other 2 that have the mariculture company could expand. The ocean energy company could definitely grow beyond Seward. It was taking hydrogen out of ocean water with a unique process it developed. And that person was sort of virtual. They were from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, but were meeting with us virtually, or in some cases coming to visit. So in that sense, yeah, it would. But it's also technology that could go into those communities as well to actually help them with their energy.
Ove?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. The way we do it, we don't offer them any form for kind of financing. We rather focus on having a great service for them as an incubator and accelerator, and connect them with probably better investors than we are. So that's our policy in this. So we don't invest in them, but it's very important for us that we, as an accelerator incubator, offer them the service to expose them to the market. Both their potential customers, but also investors. And we train them quite a lot in doing a right pitch, present themselves, how they should go about in different markets and things like that. That's a huge part of the service we offer them in this incubator and accelerator.
So, and are they mostly people from your region, or are you pulling people?
They are. We don't have a kind of a policy on that either, but it's natural that most of them are from our region. But there are some exceptions, but I would say maybe 90% is from our region.
So we've just hit the 5:15 mark, but I'd love to go through the end of the question, Misty, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. And since I have the mic, I get to hold everyone hostage.
Well, there's plenty of beer and wine out there, I can guarantee you that. So Phil, how about for you? I know that you're not a formal accelerator, but the work that particularly the robotics lab has done, you've brought big companies and small companies together, you've created an ecosystem, you've brought people from other countries, but I think you have very much a kind of a global vision. So how do you guys think about this, and how would you help other countries if somebody does come from another place?
So yeah, that's a good point in terms of we're not driven solely by boosting profits, basically. So until recently, we were government owned, and as part of that, we are the National Oceanography Centre, literally and figuratively in terms of we're trying to develop marine science primarily and not just get a slightly larger bottom line. That's great, but primarily we're trying to drive science forward and innovation forward. And as part of that, we have world-class facilities that not many people have a 100-meter research ship on their back door. So we can bring in people from all over the world to utilize these facilities that you just don't get elsewhere. And like the Innovation Center, you go up there and it's like walking into Little Italy with the amount of coffee drinking stuff that goes on. We have real pockets from certain places around the world. And that might be that, certain regions specialize in software or whatever it might be. But it's a real global community down there, which is fantastic for us. And hopefully, it benefits everybody in the long run.
For those that don't know the NOC, it's a wonderful place, and they've worked with so many different organizations from around the world. So kudos to you. And Kevin, when you were there, there's a great kind of ethos there. So Kim?
Yeah, so we originated in Hawaii, and we have a bit of a similar cultural dynamic to Alaska in that it's isolated. So we do look to support our local Hawaiian companies. We do take applications from around the world, and we get applications from around the world. My water companies are from Israel and Canada this year. When we talk about our deployment projects, we do ask that those companies work in Hawaii or Asia Pacific. In fact, Hawaii is a great place to prove a technology. Energy is incredibly expensive. Water has all kinds of issues related to climate change and sea level rise and emergency preparedness. So why not make Hawaii that leader and have those stories to share out with the rest of the communities and utilities elsewhere? So that's number one. And then the other thing that we do is education of the local community. We do a lot around STEM. So we actually work to get into the schools to educate those children and students on science and math and what our cohort of companies are doing. And even though the company might not be based in Hawaii, we open up internship opportunities to basically incorporate the local community into the great work that our companies are doing. And then on your second question about the equity, I'll put my entrepreneur hat on. I was an entrepreneur in the water industry once. It's not an easy place to be. I truly believe that having an investor and a partner that does have a little bit of an equity stake in your company goes a long way. They can help guide you. It's a mutually beneficial process. And as a program, I can be transparent, we take 1% to 3% for up to $1 million. With my founder's hat on, that is a great deal. I would really love to have the guidance and the support and the network for that percentage of equity.
That's very nice.
So for me, I cut my teeth in Kansas. And at this point, Kansas has 60 years of declining population. So we're going to talk about brain drain, like everybody who could leave did. And that's a really, really tough environment to play. And that's so many places in the world, right? Like they have their own water issues. We've got an aquifer there that's like in serious trouble, and lots of things to think about way beyond water. What we've seen is leveling in the playing field recently. Right? Last 3 to 5 years, all the tools have changed. Distribution models, funding models, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, the way we can prototype things, like all of those things become things that help level the playing field. All of a sudden we can, like last year, we helped a company, a woman with a 4th grade education, spoke no English, helped her figure out how to import something that she had access to from the country where she was originally from. She did $4 million in sales, like a small packaging project and a 1 contract with Food for Less, right? And all of a sudden we transformed not just her life, but her community, because she brought us her 23 best friends who had ideas, right? So I think we have an opportunity to play an interesting play in brain drain. In terms of the ownership and equity question, there are 70 incubators, accelerators, and co-working spaces in San Diego. Wow. Right? So we're up against a lot. And so companies come in all the time. And that's just if some of those want to take an interest. And you have accountants, lawyers, like all kinds of other vendors who are prepared to take equity position and trade for service. So it always comes down to, like, do the numbers work? So some of these programs that say we take 4% no matter what, well, if your company's valued at $10 million, it's $400,000, and you better get something for your money, right? I want to see what the value prop is. Show me an accelerator that can give you that kind of value in their 3-month program, or their 12-month or 18-month program. I mean, you really have to jump. But 3% on $1 million you're talking $30,000. Can you get that much value in the partnerships, the education, the support, the connections, like absolutely. So we're all about like just sound business decisions and taking those one at a time. So that's my answer. So thank you for asking. It's a good question. So You
Well,
wanna
I
wrap it
think
up?
it's time to call this to an end. This is day 2 of our BlueTech Summit and Tech Expo. So thank you very much for this panel. Please join me in thanking all of them.